For most of our lives, we were told that the global system is stable, that the US dollar will always dominate, that major wars between big powers are unlikely, that markets, while volatile, always recover under the same rules. But Ray Dalio says we are living through something much bigger than a normal economic cycle. He believes the global order itself is changing, not slowly in the background, but right now, in ways most people don't fully see yet. And if he's right, the next decade could look very different from the last 50 years. Before we go deeper, take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to Think Like Dalio. This channel is about understanding the big forces shaping our world so you can think clearly, while others react emotionally. If you care about your future, your money, and the stability of the world around you, you're in the right place. Ray Dalio has spent decades studying empires, markets, and economic systems. He didn't just look at recent history. He went back hundreds of years, studying the rise and fall of global powers like the Dutch, the British, and now the Americans. And what he found is something both simple and uncomfortable. Every dominant power eventually declines, not because of one mistake, but because of repeating patterns. Dalio explains that there is a big cycle that governs global order. It starts with a rising power. That country becomes productive. It invests in education. It builds strong institutions. It innovates. Its economy grows. Its military becomes strong. Its currency becomes trusted. Over time, that currency becomes the world's reserve currency. Other countries use it for trade and savings. This gives the leading power enormous influence. After World War II, the United States entered this dominant phase. The U.S. economy was strong. Infrastructure was modern. Debt levels were manageable. The dollar became the world's reserve currency. Under the Bretton Woods system, global trade expanded. Institutions like the IMF and World Bank were created. For decades, the system brought relative stability and growth. But Dalio says dominance creates comfort, and comfort can slowly create weakness. When a country becomes wealthy and powerful, it often begins to borrow more. Spending increases, debt rises, political divisions grow, wealth gaps widen. Instead of focusing on productivity and education, attention shifts toward consumption and financial engineering. Asset prices rise. Inequality grows, quietly in the background. At the same time, new powers begin to rise. They are hungry. They invest heavily in manufacturing, technology, and infrastructure. They study the dominant power carefully. They learn from it. And slowly, they start competing. Dalio often compares today's situation to the 1930s. Back then, Britain was declining as the dominant empire. The United States was rising. Germany was aggressive. Debt levels were high. Political polarization was extreme. Protectionism increased. Global cooperation broke down. He is not saying history repeats exactly, but he says the patterns are strikingly similar. One of the most important elements of global order is the reserve currency. When your currency is the world's primary reserve, you can borrow cheaply. You can run deficits longer. You can print money without immediate collapse. For decades, the U.S. enjoyed this privilege. But Dalio warns that reserve currency status is not permanent. It depends on trust. Trust in financial stability. Trust in political stability. Trust in military strength. Trust that debts will be honored without destroying the value of money. When debt levels rise too high and money printing becomes excessive, that trust can slowly weaken. In recent years, we've seen massive increases in government debt. We've seen unprecedented money creation. We've seen rising geopolitical tensions, especially between the United States and China. We've seen supply chains shift. We've seen countries explore alternatives to the dollar for trade. These are not isolated events. Dalio sees them as connected pieces of a larger transition. Another major force changing the global order is internal conflict. Dalio emphasizes that the strength of a country is not just measured by GDP or military size. It's measured by unity. When wealth gaps widen significantly, when opportunity feels unfair, when political systems become polarized, internal conflict rises, and internal conflict weakens a country's ability to compete externally. In the United States, political polarization has increased dramatically. Trust in institutions has declined. Debates have become more extreme. This internal tension matters in the big cycle. At the same time, China has risen rapidly over the past 4 decades. It invested heavily in infrastructure, manufacturing, education, and technology. It became the world's factory. Now it is pushing into advanced industries like artificial intelligence and semiconductors. It is expanding its influence through global trade initiatives. Dalio frames this not as good versus bad, but as a natural shift in relative power. When a rising power challenges a dominant one, tension increases, trade wars begin, technology restrictions appear, military competition intensifies. Both sides feel threatened. This dynamic historically increases the risk of broader conflict. But conflict does not always mean war. It can mean economic decoupling. It can mean currency competition. It can mean fragmented global alliances. Another force reshaping the order is technology. Artificial intelligence, automation, and digital systems are transforming economies. Technology increases productivity, but it also increases inequality if the gains are concentrated among capital owners rather than workers. If productivity rises but middle-class incomes stagnate, social tension grows. That tension feeds political division. Political division weakens coordinated policy. Weak policy responses can accelerate economic stress. Dalio also highlights the role of natural disasters and pandemics as accelerators of change. COVID-19 did not create global debt problems, but it dramatically accelerated them. Governments borrowed trillions. Central banks expanded balance sheets massively. The system was stabilized, but at a cost. Now we face higher debt, higher interest payments, and less flexibility. Interest rates cannot stay near zero forever without risking inflation, but raising rates increases debt servicing costs. Governments are trapped between inflation risk and recession risk. This trap is part of the late-stage cycle. When you combine high debt, internal conflict, rising external competition, and limited monetary flexibility, you get a system under stress. Dalio believes we are in such a period now. But here is something important. He does not frame this as the end of the world. He frames it as a transition. Transitions are messy. They are uncomfortable. They create volatility. But they also create opportunity for those who understand what is happening. For investors, this means diversification becomes more important. Relying on one country, one currency, or one asset class becomes riskier during transitions. For citizens, it means paying attention to education, productivity, and unity. Strong societies adapt. Weak societies fight internally and decline faster. Dalio often says that declines happen gradually, then suddenly. The early stages feel manageable. Markets still rise. Life still feels normal. But underneath, pressures build. If trust in the currency weakens significantly, inflation can accelerate. If political gridlock prevents fiscal reform, debt can spiral. If geopolitical tensions escalate, global trade can fragment. None of these are guaranteed, but the probabilities increase when multiple pressures align. Another important point Dalio makes is that cycles can last longer than people expect. The dominant power rarely collapses overnight. The British Empire declined over decades. The Dutch Empire before it followed a similar path. The United States still has enormous strengths, deep capital markets, strong innovation, powerful military capability, leading universities, entrepreneurial culture. But strengths must be maintained. If investment in education falls behind, if infrastructure decays, if political conflict paralyzes decision-making, those strengths can erode slowly. The global order is not just about economics. It is about alliances, institutions, shared rules. When countries stop cooperating under common frameworks, the system becomes more fragmented. We are already seeing signs of this. Regional trade agreements are strengthening. Sanctions are being used more frequently. Countries are building parallel payment systems. Supply chains are becoming more regional rather than fully global. This fragmentation reduces efficiency but increases resilience for some countries. It also creates uncertainty for businesses and investors. So what should we take from all this? First, understand that we are likely living through a historical transition, not a normal cycle. Second, recognize that transitions create both risk and opportunity. Third, avoid extreme thinking. It is not about total collapse or endless dominance. It is about gradual shifts in relative power. Dalio encourages studying history not to predict exact outcomes, but to recognize patterns. When debt rises too high, it eventually needs restructuring or inflation. When wealth gaps widen too far, political reform or conflict usually follows. When a rising power challenges a dominant one, tension increases until a new balance is found. As we move through the 2020s and beyond, these forces will likely shape markets, currencies, and geopolitics more than short-term headlines. If you've stayed with this video until now, I'd love to hear your perspective. Do you believe the global order is truly shifting? Or do you think the current system will remain dominant for decades? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thoughtful discussion makes this community stronger. And if this analysis helped you see the bigger picture more clearly, consider sharing this video with someone who still views today's events as isolated news stories. The more people understand the larger cycle, the better prepared we all are. And think like Dalio. The goal is not fear, it's clarity. In times of transition, clear thinking becomes a competitive advantage. The global order is changing, not overnight, not in one dramatic headline, but through powerful forces building slowly over time. The question is not whether change is happening. The question is whether we are paying attention.